Every minute, every hour, every day, every week of your life is made up of three things: a thought, an emotion, and a feeling. And if you're fearful, fear will find you. Fear is a huge emotional state, which I like to remind people of. When you're emotional, you're suggestible. I feel like a lot over the years, people have taken tidbits of these types of things and integrated them into principles of how to sell, how to motivate people, how to get, but they don't have a complete understanding of what that is. If we're talking about primitive or primal, there's no way you're going to catch yourself a bear or a rabbit with your bare hands. It's going to be a tough. So you could spend days fasting. Everyone is taking steroids. You go into a gym, and John Smith and Roger Bennett, who don't have any aspirations to become an athlete, are taking steroids. And when you apply food, time, and also temperature, you can get everything you want out of your body.
All right, guys, it's Ryan here. So we've got another episode of the Wealthy Way podcast. Now, this one's going to be a lot different than some of our other episodes where, they're about money and business and success. Part of the Wealthy Way is health and figuring out mindset and different things like that. So I've actually brought on a guy who is doing things very different than probably what you hear. He is a Taoist master. He has trained people in Silicon Valley, tech entrepreneurs, on all of these principles of mindset and fasting. We were talking about quantum physics and like testosterone, and like there's so many things that we're going to dive into. So I've got San Qing with me. What's up, man?
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what is a Taoist master?
Right. So a Taoist master is like, I'm sort of an ordained priest, and I have developed skills in two different sects of Taoism. One is the Zhongyi sect, and the other one is the San Qing sect. And these are different sort of perceptions or principles of training within Taoism. So we go deeper into the metaphysics and understanding how to sort of like connect with the universe. And that's what sort of like Taoism is all about. Is connecting with the universe. So that's where you would reflect on something like quantum physics and sort of understand that people are interconnected. Taoists have been using these sort of like principles for thousands of years to acquire their higher sense of awareness through connecting with all the energies within the universe, knowing that everything is interconnected, that there is only two forms of things that operate within this universe: electromagnetics and your consciousness. And to that, you develop an awareness of who you are and your perception of your reality. So getting back to the master aspect is, I've developed these skills over time, and you sort of get to a certain level, and the powers to be give you the title of Taoist master. But in of itself, you look at someone like a Mantak Chia, for example, who you may or may not have heard of.
I haven't heard of him. Okay,
so Mantak Chia has acquired a lot of skills taking Taoist principles and has brought them over to the Western world, and he's not a Taoist priest or a Taoist master, but he's considered a Taoist master. That's how he titles himself. So it's just a matter of being an expert in that particular field. So when it comes to metaphysics, that's how I've acquired that title.
Got it. So, as somebody, we were talking about faith and everything before the show and everything. As a Christian, I've never experimented into all of these other things. And even we were talking about Tony Robbins pre-show too, about, because basically my first thought was are you like Tony Robbins with helping people believe in themselves and get confidence and all of these things?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, we actually do things a lot different than what Tony does. And then we got into this whole debate of what percentage of your time are you conscious versus unconscious, right?
Right.
You want to go into that?
Sure. I mean, when you look at the fundamentals of conscious and unconscious process, and I asked you this question, and you were pretty intuitively very correct. Most people operate at about 5% consciously, 95% unconsciously, all day, every day.
And that's what we would call our habits, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you acquire from a psychological or how would I put it? If you were to go to a therapist, a psychologist, they would give you a timeline. So normally what happens is from 0 to about 10 years of age, you develop these perceptions of your reality. You create and form your belief system. And psychologists would call it a turning point at the age of 10. You operate with brain waves that basically make you very porous to absorbing information. So you shift your brain waves through the course of a day. When you wake up, your body produces more serotonin, and then your brain will start to activate a beta brainwave, and you operate in that beta brainwave through the course of the day, making you focused or more hyper-focused at what you do. So now if you have someone who takes a cup of coffee and they're already in beta and they're hyper beta because they're now adding the personality self, the emotions, all the things that are controlling their perception, they get really anxious and super focused, and they can't get that thought out of their mind, and it keeps repeating over and over and over again.
Yep.
As a child, you operate from day one. You're living in this theta state, which is basically what most people move into just before they go to sleep. It's when you start to turn the lights out, there's less light coming into your pineal gland. You will start to produce melatonin as a natural response to your circadian rhythm through the course of the day. Then you shift down into what they call a theta state, which is where, from a principle of faith, as you and I have, what's a great thing to do before you go to bed?
Pray.
Pray. And guess what? When you set that, your unconscious is listening. So when you're in that theta state and you pray, you're going to start your next day with the way you felt the night before. So, you know, as most people, they talk about, don't ever say horrible things before you go to sleep. Always wish everyone well, send them your love, tell them that you love them, and you go to bed, right? So that was like that aha moment that you got right now, that sort of like electric charge of excitement.
Yeah.
Because you can connect with what I'm saying and understand it on an intuitive level. But then this is where the lucid dreaming starts taking place, and you can now map and change your reality for the next day by setting forth in this, you know, computer base that we were talking about, how, you know, DNA, a little drop of DNA, just a little bit on your fingertip, holds up to 700 terabytes of information.
It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you interconnect with the universe, you are now we can reflect on things like epigenetics, right? So epigenetics in a nutshell, if we get all the science-based stuff out of the equation, is you are the product of your environment. Your thoughts change your reality, and you can actually turn on and off your gene expression with your thoughts alone.
So this brings me to, I mean, there was obviously a lot to unpack there, than what you said. There's a lot of scientific stuff that you mentioned, right? Because I think when people hear just anything to do with faith, they immediately think, okay, well, this is something that's just not really able to be proven.
Right.
That's the definition of faith, right? If it was just proven, then it wouldn't really require faith. It would just be fact.
Right.
So to hear all these scientific things, I'm interested to dive deep into them, because a lot of things that I have intuitively done, like you said, I feel like I've just intuitively done. Like I can't consciously do them. I just do. Right. And then you're saying, well, yeah, 95% of the stuff you do, you're not conscious of. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Well, how did I develop my belief system that makes me act the 95% of the time that I do act? Interesting.
So now we talk about your DNA, right? So DNA, up until this point, if you had to, and I'm not going to plug any search engine, but just go to one. And you would
Chat GPT.
Yeah, there you go, right? So if you understand DNA is like you're operating on about 14 generations of DNA that influences your perception of your reality, where you have deja vu moments. So like when we were talking about the theta brainwave, which makes you very porous to change, and basically your opportunity when you're in that theta state, you are going to learn very quickly. So any sort of system that anyone that wants to teach someone information using their senses, there's going to be whatever the system is for having kids teach them to understand or absorb information. They're going to understand that the first thing they need to do is to create a state of coherence, which is putting them in that theta state. When you go and meditate, just generally speaking, because it's kind of got like a dirty word these days, I would say from everything I know about you, your meditation is prayer. Go to the Bible, do whatever.
Yep.
You are going to instantly change the state you're in through that connection with that information. So when we go back to the theta brainwave state, and then we define it through a psychologist's eyes, that you get to an age of about 10, then you develop what they call a critical faculty, which is the firewall of your mind, which your belief system is set in stone for what it is right here, right now. And then you move forward into the rest of your life, and you repeat whatever good or bad behaviors you were that created in the first 10 years of your existence in this world. So a classic example would be, you've got some friend, he's like 65, right? And or maybe your parents. Why don't we use that? And it's like,
yep.
And your mother looks at you and says, your dad is really being childish right now. And you're like, what do you mean? He's literally having a tantrum right now because I'm not cooking him his meal the way he wants it. And that is a behavior that he is not even aware of, that he's operating from, that he picked up and acquired when he was only 5 years of age. And no one's ever given him the skills to understand that he can change that. So socially, he sees his world one way, and we're able to observe it another. So what happens? You get to the age of 10, you create that critical faculty, the firewall of your mind, you move forward in your life. That's where people are looking for relief. It's like, okay, I got a thought, I've got an idea. It's like a rat in a wheel. I can't get it out of my head. How do I get it out of my head? Well, now they look for relief. They sit on the couch with a psychiatrist, they get a therapist, a life coach, somebody that's going to give them insight as to why they're struggling with their perception, right?
Right.
So really, it comes down to understanding how to unlock that, so you yourself have the skills to change your brain waves and change the state you're in within 126 seconds. No, that was just a in your world, I think you call that a soft plug. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. You have your app. That's so. What's the app? It's 126.
It's called The Way.
The
and
Way.
The Way. So within Taoism, Tao itself means the way.
Got it. Okay.
And so 126 experience is one aspect of the Way app. So there's actually three parts to it. The 126 experience is the conscious and unconscious stuff, or high level spirituality. Then I have another component called longevity, which works with hot and cold exposure and also nutrition. So then you are able to sort of like know when to eat, what to eat, how to eat, and how to evoke the most out of your chemistry, which all those hormones affect your mental emotional state. And then finally your physical state, being supple, which is the other component to the Way, which works on how you move to elevating your sensitivity to your electromagnetic field, which is running all day, every day, and without it you die.
Yep.
But you want to create and reduce your fight or flight threat level, so you elevate your mechanoreception, which are the receptors within all the joints in your body. So when you move, you bring that threat level down. And that's why people are like, I don't know what to do. I'm stressed out. I just need to walk. I need to run. I need to exercise.
Right.
And so by doing that, you are sending a signal to your brain to bring that threat level down, which changes the state you're in just through physical exercise.
So I want to talk about a few things from there. So one would be, I want to know why my morning routine works the way it does.
Okay.
Because I do exercise, I pray, like you said, I read my Bible, I journal, I write things I'm grateful for, and I've been doing this for years, right? And I know for a fact it's had such a huge, tremendous impact on my life, and I tell people to do. I'm like, you should do a morning routine. It's really important. But I think one thing you brought up was like, until you actually feel it, yourself, it's easy for me to just say you should do it. But until you actually do it and experience it, you're not going to really have that aha moment.
Right.
Like you said. And then, so I want to touch on that. And I also want to touch on after the belief system. Like how does this get created before you're 10 years old, and why is it so difficult to break?
Right.
So
yeah. So
let's talk about the morning routine.
Okay. So
why is this effective?
So let's start off with, how early do you get up? Pretty early?
Right now I start getting up at 4:30.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Because that happens to be the time when your brain is producing high theta brainwaves.
At 4:30.
Yeah. And most people call it the magic hour, the witching hour, something weird where intuitively they get up and they can't understand why, but I just feel like I'm very creative right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, why am I getting up at this time? Am I getting some type of signal? Well, in actuality, you are, because you're very porous to change and information at that particular time. And that's when you want to affect change, first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So the brainwave is active, right?
Okay.
So what you're taking in is going to have a solidifying effect on how you perceive your reality. So if we're looking at conscious and unconscious behavior, you are now taking back the conscious component and taking away from the unconscious habit that is limiting your ability to do whatever it is that you need to do.
Right.
So you can set forth those goals. So morning and evening routines are critical to getting results and staying within the goal setting that you have. So, affirmations, incantations, mantras, all these types of things are very, very powerful if you know how to and when to put them into your routine for the course of the day, which I also add as a morning and evening routine is critical.
Got it. So you had mentioned when we were talking about praying and reading my Bible, you're like, you're actively changing your brain and all those things. Like what's happening?
So you're developing, these energy pathways, these information pathways in the brain. In a nutshell, you call them a synapses connective wiring. Mm-hmm. So when you hear people talking about rewiring your brain or rewiring your unconscious or changing your behavior, when you do anything, you're exposed to something for the first time, you are going to create these pathways, these information highways within your brain. And the more you do it, the more masterful you become, the more of an expert that you become at this particular skill. So it happens faster. So your thought process, your ability to apply that information becomes better and better and better and better to a point where, the sky's the limit. Mm-hmm. But it's an entrained thing.
Yeah. So what about workouts?
Okay. Let's reference back also to when you do prayer.
Okay.
You understand that, and you mentioned gratitude because that to me is a dirty word right now. A lot of people, I'm grateful. You don't look so grateful, but everyone's like, I'm so grateful. You told me to be grateful. I'm grateful for everything. Well, what I like to call virtue signaling is what most people get up to. They feel like, I found God. Okay, so what does that mean? I've taken the shirt off my back. I've sold my car. I've sold my house. I'm living on the side of the road, and every day I'm praying to God to tell him, I'm here. I'm ready for your next download, and my download is I want $5 million, and it doesn't happen, and
right?
Because there's a process that goes on for your connection with that higher self, and then also understanding your interconnection with the universe, and so. When you talk about gratitude and you truly connect with that, within the Way app, I always remind people, everything, every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week of your life is made up of three things: a thought, an emotion, and a feeling. Beginning and end. You can regress, you can go back, you can take a moment, you can ponder on whatever happened in your life up to this point, or right now, you are having a thought, a feeling, and an emotion. And when you understand that there is a distinct difference between feeling and emotion.
I was going to ask you that. Like,
right.
They sound the same.
Right. Well, they evoke different things. So an emotion will evoke a chemical response where you will have a physiological impact. So that affects your hormonal cascade, right? So you that's where you get the kinesthetic response. So that's that feeling that you have And your awareness of your electromagnetic field will determine how intuitive you are, how sensitive you are to what's coming in, what information you're getting. But let's get back to the gratitude component, because this is not, this is again a scientific fact when you want to create coherence, because when you understand the heart is magnetic and the brain is electric, when you connect those two, you create a coherence. The coherence is your mental emotional state. So your emotions emote a certain frequency and a vibration. And when you're in gratitude, you are synchronizing using also your DNA. We go back to the 700 terabytes within just that little strand of DNA. Then you have your connection with the universe through the emotion, because the emotions will elevate your frequency or decrease your frequency. And so that's where people are like, I've just tried all day long. I've tried to manifest. I just can't do it. I keep telling myself, I'm good. I'm a great person. I can get this done. And what happens is you're taking the energy that is surrounding you, and basically your auric field, which is a transmission that comes from your heart, because all information is not coming from your brain. It's actually coming from your heart. All information comes in and out through the heart. And so there's an interesting reference point. If you're ever looking at that, you can refer to a company called Heart Math.
Okay.
And they've been studying it for over 30 years. And basically, through measuring the transmission from your heart to your field out into the universe is questionable between 12 and 15 feet. You have an electromagnetic field that is transmitting information all day, every day. And those
How did these fields work? Like, I mean, you were talking about quantum physics, and you said that that's the study of everything kind of being interconnected. And I've heard lots of people talk about this, and science was the one thing I always sucked at. I was always great at math. I was pretty good at English, and I was good at, like, I guess, things like that. But every time it came to science, I did not pay attention at all.
Right.
And so when I hear like these electromagnetic fields and everything, and you're like, yeah, you can feel the energy around you.
Right.
Like on one hand, and I'm like, can you really? And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, I mean, how do you explain different things when you can feel like, man, I vibe with this guy?
Right. So let's address that. So when you're looking at let's go back to what you're talking about. So you have a mindset. You're starting with the mindset, which is there's a high level of fear, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
It doesn't align with your belief system. That's okay, because that's generally not straight. Even though there is a high level of mysticism within Christianity, if you go deep into it, most people don't practice it. Most Christians that I've ever come across do not practice levels of mysticism, or more on the electromagnetic metaphysics level, right? But let's just talk about understanding that emotion of fear, and the fear of, hey, well, someone dipping into my thoughts or my emotions, or that seems a little strange. Well, you have to look at the fact that when you're out of the chute, you have a primal instinct of survival. There's two things you want to do: reproduce and survive. And guess what? We're in 2023.
We've made it.
Where there's no predators looking to eat Ryan. So you're not running away from some ominous like predator that looks at you as a dinner, and you're not worried about whether you're going to make it to 25, because that's generally the onset of what most people would, up until this last century, most people had a time frame or length of life that was very, very minimal. Like we're talking about numbers right now where people are living 78, 80 as an average.
Yeah.
And that's really strange for men and women. I mean, women are up to like 78. Men are just tipping over the 70 mark. For history of the world, of the history of human beings, that's a long period of time. And now we're dipping into, longevity and understanding hormones and, all that kind of stuff.
Some of the doctors were telling me like they're going to, have these 3D printed organs and things and replace it. And he's like, dude, I wouldn't be surprised if people are living until they're 150.
Right. Absolutely. But the mindset. So if we go back to understanding that you are introspective, analytical, skeptical.
Yes,
That's how
very
human beings
skeptical.
are. That's human beings are skeptical. That's just how they work. That's a baseline. And so for you to step over that, being a primal instinct of survival, you have to have an experience that solidifies your knowing for it to be true. So it's like, okay, we can go on and on and on about you shutting off your ability to feel something, but this is a scientific fact. There's an electromagnetic field running through your body right now. Without it, you're dead. So just on that note, if you started there as a baseline and then explored the understanding that everything is energy, everything is electric, everything is magnetic, and between the two, that's basically the sum of all parts, and of course consciousness. If you start with that and you explore that coming from a place where it's a little hard for you to grasp the idea of, oh, this is energy, woo-woo, do I have to feel it? Yeah, and that's really the component that's necessary for me when I teach people, is feeling, becoming sensitive to the electricity that is around you, that's in you, that is matter, right? So you are at a starting point where I don't believe. I'm kind of like, it doesn't work for me. Yet I can give you some of those other factoids that we briefly touched on earlier that make sense to you, like how you activate your brain waves through a thought process, because that's basically how you measure it. I would say go to Heart Math and read up on all their peer-reviewed studies that vast the last 30 years. There's no question they can measure someone's emotional state transmitted from their heart within 15 feet and tell you how you're feeling. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So for someone like yourself that's there at that point where it's like, kind of sounds woo-wooey.
Yeah.
I kind of get it, but I'm not until you find it tangible. So, for example, the Way 126 experience. I guarantee you, as a human being, if you have the physiology of a human being and you're not an alien.
Okay.
Now, if you're an alien, it's probably not going to work on you. But if you're a human being, you're going to have a physiological response to the material. And when you have that experience, then you have to stop and go, now what? I just sat down and I looked and listened to something that fundamentally changed me and the way I feel and perceive my reality through sound and vision, which is basically the five senses that human beings work on. And then you want to, people talk about the sixth sense going into the fourth dimension through quantum physics. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole.
That's a whole big rabbit hole, sounds like.
That's a massive one. But understanding that you've got to start with that baseline, and especially for someone like yourself, you need to start with understanding how sound makes you feel, how your thoughts change your reality.
Well, how does sound make me feel? Because for me, and people have always talked about this, like music being a really big thing. And I love like listening to worship music, and, it just like when I have the choice between if I'm doing a workout, and I know like a lot of people like to listen to podcasts like this, and I think it's great. But for me, I'm always like, you know what, I'd rather just listen to worship music. And like that gets me in a better feel and a state of mind than like learning something.
Right. And so again, you are intuitively gravitating to that material that elevates your gratitude, elevates your emotional state, that you are now replicating this feeling or knowing of just being grateful, being content, being whole. And that's where the coherence comes in.
Yeah, because I don't really care if I learn something new today. Like I'm just trying to, feel good and be grateful. Right.
And that gratitude for you is not just a throwaway word. It's impacted your whole reality. It's impacted yourself, your family, your life, your peers, your businesses, and it all starts from that. So you can always reflect on that. I'm not going to say I'm psychic, but I could guarantee you believe that everything that's handed to you is from God.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how did I end up this way? It sounds like, you're talking about this thing of 10 years is when you start to develop your belief system and maybe your, emotional trauma that you may carry with you as an adult, acting like a child, throwing temper tantrums. How does that happen? Why?
Well, you yourself seem to be very even keeled. If I was to look at your mental emotional state just from reading the energy, hang on, woo woo, which I tend to get into. I teach people how to read energy.
Okay.
It's not that really difficult to perceive or understand and feel the energy, right? So you would have to, I would say most of the time you're a very even-keeled, very grounded sort of person. You may step into a little bit of anxiety and possibly fear, but it's not what drives you. Mm-hmm. You're pretty much level-headed most of the time. Mm-hmm. Anger is not an emotion you tend to lean on, but a little anxiety, some fear goes into it.
Yeah,
and these
100%.
are just things that are sampling from your auric field and the energy that you're putting out. I was like, oh, yeah, you probably just watched all my videos. But that's really not who you are, as much as you would like people to believe that. You are far more an easygoing type of guy that people can relate with, and that's rapport. That's another psychodynamic loop. You want to go back to the handbook of a psychologist. You work with that psychodynamic loop, and you create what is the magic that you put out throughout your businesses. That psychodynamic loop also works with people's unconscious behavior. So, and when we're referring back to Tony Robbins is, your motivational guy. No, he's the grandfather or godfather to what we call NLP. I don't think you know what that is.
Yeah, neuro-linguistic programming,
which scares the life out of most people.
Yeah, well, I know that a lot of people use it for sales and everything, but I actually was talking to somebody about this the other day. I was like, I wonder if I should do NLP. Like, I've heard of it, but I just don't even know.
Well, you're doing it anyway.
Okay.
So understanding how to create rapport with someone. And so basically some of the simple skills that most people that learn NLP will, you work with someone's unconscious, and that's how you're feeding them information, right? Which I'm not a big fan of the NLP stuff, because it's about that individual growing themselves. It's not about you persuading them, and in some cases I believe manipulating them by using linguistics to get your job done through tonality. So that tonality can anchor information into your unconscious. So you submit the first 101 hetero action of submission is by reaching out and putting your hand out. So you as a human being will submit by shaking someone's hand. That's the first strike from NLP programming. Okay. Second strike is, what's your name? Ryan. Second strike, that's all you need. Then they go about in your unconscious is now ready to submit to whatever that person says as yes. So it's kind of like a manipulation, which I'm not a fan of. Yeah. But this is how people perceive. You don't need that, because you're genuine and you're sharing information where you're coming from your heart, which is the epicenter of information, and you're sharing it because you want people to succeed. As I always put it within how I teach people, your gift is your offering. So whatever you give out, and people can put it into that karmic circle of, oh, it's karma. No, karma doesn't work like that. I mean, we can go down that road. People kind of go, oh, that person cut me off. They're going to get theirs when they get home, or they're going to have a car crash, or it's way more within the construct of that person's perception. So however you perceive your reality is how that karma program works. It's nothing to do with most of the people that rant on about karma itself. Karma, guess what? It's got to do with what you believe. Yeah. And if you're fearful, fear will find you. Fear is a huge emotional state, which I like to remind people of. When you're emotional, you're suggestible.
It's funny, is I tell people this all the time, because we teach a lot of people to get on social media and entrepreneurs, and you and I were talking about this before the show. You're like, hey, I haven't done a good enough job of putting myself out there and getting on social media. And one of people's big fears is judgment from other people, right? How they're going to be perceived by others. And I always tell them, I'm like, look, I get tons of hate every single day in comments and DMs and just people making videos about me. And I'm like, I really don't care, because I know who I am. Right. And most of these people are projecting their own problems onto me.
And how did you come up with that? How did you understand that inner working of this person is projecting? And so this comes back to, unfortunately, I'm going to poke holes in your skepticism of energy.
Okay.
Because you slam dunked it yourself, just unconsciously. Well, they're projecting their emotions on me. Well, if you don't believe in energy, that's not possible. So
I guess
intuitively,
I don't want to say I don't believe in energy. I guess what I'm thinking about is like, I guess what's the benefit of understanding energy?
well,
I mean, you're talking about reading energy,
Yeah.
which I would say is like, oh, well, I can just kind of read their body language.
that's the same. Yeah, very
Yeah.
good. Well, I mean, we can go down body language route. The linguistic perspective is someone talks to you. And I mean, if I don't go into the energetic component, I just listen to someone's speaking.
Yeah.
You can tell unconsciously where they're operating from, because most of the words that they use are words that reflect how they're really thinking.
Right.
So it's like, for example, classic one. Hey, you say to me, hey, guess what, San, can you come and help me move? I'm moving my house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, you know what? I am. I'm going to help you. No problems. I'll be there, Ryan. I'll be there on Saturday. I'll try my best.
Yeah. You're like, you're probably not committed.
Well, the word try is the omission of failure.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a sense that this guy's not completely committed to what you're asking, but in actuality, I'm telling you exactly how I'm thinking. And then on Monday, he comes around and goes, hey, what happened, man? You were supposed to come and help me. I tried to. I really did. I just couldn't get out there.
Yeah.
A phone call, anything. So that dialogue is going on. So really when you...
And that's how just people are.
That's how they are. So when you say you're very good at reading people,
Mm-hmm.
you are using these skills, whether you've learned, body language, or, you're going through understanding linguistics, or you're just intuitively very good at reading people.
Mm-hmm.
That's still all energy. Because
Yeah.
once again, we go back to, you're afraid of, what does that entail? That sounds like some sort of like Harry Potter, mystical, energetic type of stuff, magic,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't align with what you believe in. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely fine. The scientific base model is just understanding that we're all interconnected. So when we go back to the DNA,
Okay.
right, and the 700 terabytes of information just within 1 gram of DNA, right, and that you are just connected with all information. Like if you go back to the quantum model and understand that you're collapsing time and space and that things happen instantly through your thought alone,
Mm-hmm.
the classic one I always get people to start with, because you're being interrupted by mental emotional state. Your ability to thrive in, say, this perspective is only because you have a mindset that I'm a little fearful of energy. I don't like the idea of this Harry Potter magical, mystical stuff. That doesn't align with my belief system. But if you understand that when you take and remove the emotional component, which creates an incoherence, right, you will immediately go, hey, I've got nothing to win or lose. I'm going down the street to the supermarket. I want a parking space right in front. How many times have you done that?
A lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's everyone's famous parking ferry. But you're projecting a thought form
Yeah.
into the universe, and it's aligning with your thought form. That packet of information is connecting, and then you are creating that space. You are creating the manifestation that you have formed a parking space. Now, that's as simple as it gets for manifesting. But unfortunately, people then go down the rabbit hole of going, well, let's read The Secret. I mean,
Yeah.
probably who hasn't, right?
Yeah.
All it takes is getting you out of the way.
What are
First
your thoughts
person-
on The Secret?
It's it's absolutely tangible. It's absolutely pliable, and you could possibly apply it to a certain experience. But generally speaking, you have to set yourself up with a really deep understanding of these things to just go, hey, universe, provide for me. Because in your unconscious, and that's why the way is so powerful, is because it works with your unconscious, taking back that process so that you are operating and you're aware of what you're doing all the time. So I always like to say, you are not a slave of your emotions, you're a master Most people believe that their emotions control them. Absolutely not. You control your emotions. They don't control you.
Yeah, I think like I remember reading The Secret, man, at least 10 plus years ago. And, I was young at the time. And like I said, I grew up in the church, which obviously, like we're talking about now with 10 years old, your belief system is developed very young. But I remember reading it and I was like, this is kind of an interesting thing. Like, you just think what you want and you get it. Right.
Right.
And I think, it's a concept that to basically tie everything together, to your point, if you're actively like trying to manifest these things, like, hey, I want to improve my career, I want to build my business better. Like if you're actively, consciously thinking about these things, you are going to naturally notice more opportunities, attract more people that are also interested. You're going to act differently. And like these things should happen, not from like, I would say the voodoo of just like, you're actually consciously taking proper steps.
And how did you acquire that belief system? Because really, if you take it from a psychologist's perspective, you're activating what they call the reticular activative system. Okay, so basically what that means in a nutshell is, have you ever bought a car? I just bought a brand new car.
I see them everywhere.
And you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
Because you've set your unconscious to identify every car that is red.
Right.
You bought a red car, you go down the street, you see 5 red cars, they're all the same cars. All of a sudden, I never saw them before. You are programming yourself
to be aware.
That. Yeah, yeah.
With the, we're talking about 95% of what you're doing being unconscious. Does that ever change? Like,
well, that's the whole point. When you're given the tools, that's why
what ratio could you get to?
I mean, it's endless.
Okay.
Really. When you do the way, right, you go through, it's a 9-week program. You subscribe, it goes for 9 weeks. And then I have another 8 levels after that take you to a whole nother level of consciousness. But I can guarantee you, anyone that uses this app will be more than profoundly over the moon with their ability to master themselves within the first 9 weeks. You are at a place where, hang on a second, I'm feeling and thinking a certain way. I can pivot and shift gears and go in another direction like that. Because I've trained myself. So this material works with your unconscious to bring that consciousness to the forefront. So you're no longer
to not just keep falling into these habits and pre-programmed emotions that you've been living with for a long time. And so
someone like yourself who's extremely gifted, and I'm not using a pun for that, but really, because you believe your faith is unfaltering. It's like you are very laser focused on that, and you realize that you know who you are, you know where you're going. And that's part of some of the stuff that I use for messaging within the app. Because once you obtain that skill and you're able to pivot and feel a certain way, think a certain way, and you've done it. Again, we talk about, you're telling me it's energy, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really mean much. You have to experience it, and that's the part that is really important. So the visual and audible experience evokes a kinesthetic response. When you have that electromagnetic charge and that feeling of change, you know it's real. And it's only real until you say it's real. So that is critical to any human's level of consciousness. So when you say, well, what are the percentages? Well, it's up to the individual, really.
Right.
I mean, so you're replicating your own skill set by overseeing all these businesses, and you're like, okay, well, this has worked for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to hold the secret sauce.
Yeah.
I'm going to share it with people, and I'm genuinely going to help them.
Yeah.
It builds tenfold, right? You handing out the information that most people would probably spend a fortune to acquire, that you put in a program. I'm sure it's not free, and it shouldn't be, because there needs to be a value system, right? Yeah. And understanding with that value system, then you acquire a validation and appreciation for it, a grateful viewpoint by, oh, well, Ryan's succeeded. I'm going to acquire his mentorship, his program, his business, because I can see his success, and you genuinely share that with him.
It's interesting. You just said like a value system. It got me thinking, like, you're like, yeah, it shouldn't be free because you should have a value system. And it's like, it's so true, because when something is free, you don't really value it, right? Like it takes a very certain type of person who can value something that's free. And it's like, I don't know why this went through my mind, but I was thinking like a Louis Vuitton bag. It's like the reason people value it is because it has this perceived value of being so high, versus like what makes the Louis Vuitton bag any different than the plastic grocery bag that you can go get for free. They're both bags.
And again, programming, I would speak on that as the sense of it is a programming. So it's your perception of your reality. So you go to a place of congregation once a week to be around like-minded people that value and appreciate Jesus and God. Guess what? You're going to find people there that are selfless, that are resonating with those emotions and those thoughts and truly can connect with what you're saying. And so value system is a completely different ballgame. Again, perception. So when you put that out, you speak on that, then that becomes your reality. Well, it's only going to be valuable if someone pays for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's your perspective and your perception as you know it. That's your truth as you know it up until this point. And when you change that belief system, you shift to another level of consciousness also. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know?
So why does this happen when you're 10 years old?
It's just a cycle of how the brain is developed, and as you grow, as all the senses, all the chemistry, all the hormones are developing in your body, it comes to a certain point where there's a cutoff. And so your brain is developed at a certain level, and you change the brainwaves. So no longer are you operating a theta brainwave. The classic one is your son is 4 years old.
Yep.
You could go in and say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't know what your son's name is. James, guess what? Barney's coming right now. He's like, oh, you're kidding me, Dad. Well, of course, he's not. You said he's not speaking, but you could see his excitement. You understand that he knows what that is. And he's not suspending a disbelief because he just accepts what you're saying. That's truth. And so that's a brainwave that he's in. So parenting 101 is really important, that what you put into your child is critical to
this is it.
And so, because they're not going to suggest anything else. They're going to accept what you say to them at face value. So when you say, Johnny, you're never going to be anything when you grow up, you are forming these belief systems. But more so when we go back to that, you're like, well, how did I get these belief systems? How did I get to the age of 10? We're also talking about the DNA. You're working on 14 generations of DNA programming.
Right.
And that's a scientific fact that goes way back.
Well, yeah, and even with DNA and belief systems, like as I'm reflecting across all this, because I love hearing like this totally other side of why things happen the way they happen. Because I'm like a guy who's not detail oriented, and so I'm like, well, yeah, this just happens, and then to hear why it happens is really good. But with, for instance, me growing up, right? We've been talking about faith, which is great. But like the other side of like, let's just talk about me as the individual and the athlete and the business guy. I grew up with my parents always telling me, Ryan, you can do whatever you want. You can be the best. If you work really hard, you can do all these things, right? And I grew up believing that, right? They never limited me on like, Ryan, no, that's crazy. You can't think that big. They're like, you could be the best baseball player in the world. Like, we can give you the tools and the resources to do it. You just got to put in the work and perform. And, like that belief system today has been in everything I do. I'm like, I could go do that. Like, I don't believe there's anything I can't do.
And that is the most powerful thing your parents could have done for you. Right? Is framing that perception of reality and realizing that anything. So you don't, most of the time when you approach anything, you get it first time, second time. I'm not highly evolved from an academic perspective. I just go in and absorb from a practical perspective.
Yeah.
Information, experiences, and that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I've thought about, my wife will tell you this. She's like, I don't know how you ended up the way you ended up, because your parents like spoiled you. And like, when you see kids who are spoiled and handed things, like they end up being like terrible people. right? Just
Right.
because they don't have to deal like with failure. They don't have to deal with, like everyone told them they're the best all the time and they're not. And I don't know, like, because the way I was raised, I should have ended up very, I guess, a lot more arrogant, and I don't know.
Well, not really. I mean, okay, so let's go back to something called mirror neurons.
Okay.
So when you're feeding your child, right, you get a spoon of food and you want them when they're really young and they don't really understand food or what to do with a utensil. You're sort of taking a scoop of baby food and you're trying to put it in their mouth. You open up, and they mimic what your behavior is.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we call a response from the mirror neurons that are within you. So that's how you create your psychodynamic loop.
Okay.
So when you're within an audience, people start to do that all the time. All of a sudden you're sitting and next minute, we start mirroring our behaviors, like-minded. And you can tell by body language, if someone is interested in what you have to say, they're going to direct their body towards you, not away from you.
You're going to lean in.
They're going to lean in. And these are, I feel like a lot over the years, people have taken tidbits of these types of things and integrated them into principles of how to sell, how to motivate people, but they don't have a complete understanding of what that is.
Right.
They're kind of like using bits and pieces. And I learned this at this course. I learned this at this course, and this worked for me here, and this works for me here. But they don't understand why it's working.
Right.
And so, understanding that you are mirroring the fundamental belief system of what your parents taught you when you were a child, regardless of whether they gave you $1 million or a silver spoon or
right.
They were pandering to your every whim.
Yeah.
You grasped those core values, and they were reflected on your life, whether you were successful or not, or what you achieved or didn't achieve. They remain the same. And that comes from having a belief system, which I always remind people of, is the most important thing. And you look at society today, and they want you to steer away from belief system. They want you to break it down. They want you to destroy it, and they want you to find it in external forces like drugs and alcohol.
So true. Yeah. It's funny because, and this is a whole nother thing with just drugs and alcohol and everything. It's like I'm a part of other groups, and they don't really have belief systems like you're talking about. They don't have faith, and so they try all these different things to solve a problem. And to me, it's so obvious. I'm like, you lack faith. You don't. This is why you're always ending up the way you're ending up. This is why your marriage has such a big problem, because you both have totally different things that you believe. There's no central focus. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, Mindy and I, obviously having the same belief system, if things go wrong and we have an issue, we know where to turn, right? And so it's very easy to have an arbitrator and a core belief of what how we solve an issue, versus like if you have two subjective people who have two totally different belief systems, and maybe some of it is intertwined, but it makes it a lot harder.
Well, that's a reflection also. When you have a marriage that is a unity, which that's the core belief system that I have. If you're married, you're as one.
Yep.
And
one
so
flesh.
That understanding, you realize that you're also, again, integrating the basic principle of epigenetics, which you are the product of your environment. So, and that plays on also the mirror neurons. So you're reflecting of each other's behavior and become stronger and stronger. Then you create more.
And we start becoming more like each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Speaking of the product of your own environment, it reminded me of the book. I think it was Atomic Habits, and he just talked about how like all these American soldiers in Vietnam got hooked on opium, and they were like, dude, this is going to be a huge pandemic when these people come back from war, because they're all addicted to drugs. And like they came back, and 90+% of them didn't touch drugs. They were good. It was just like they were a product of their environment of, hey, everyone else is doing drugs, I'll do drugs. It's easily accessible here. Versus in the U.S., they were no longer around that environment. The stress was gone. They're not killing people.
Oh, absolutely. So that also reflects on you as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
You look at your environment. Who do I share my time with? Who do I have my children share my time with, their time with?
Yeah.
So, it's like either you're homeschool. Are you homeschooling? I don't
We're
know.
homeschooling now.
Amazing. Now, homeschooling in of itself, it's like you are now getting to enjoy all those precious moments, whether it's yourself or your wife. You guys are the ones that are enjoying those precious moments with your children, not someone else that you have to pay for
Who
an
may be
8
teaching
hour.
a crazy belief system.
Yes, and that is the key issue with the education system right now, is how people are being programmed and how they're supposed to perceive or believe. And, right down to academia, where I have a lot of people that I work with where their children, recently over the last couple of years wanted to hang them across over a tree because of their belief system wasn't in line with what they believed in.
Right.
And, when it comes down to they were part of a mass psychosis that created this, it's kind of like, you get into the mob, the mob mentality, which again is the product of your environment. You just get swept up into the thought process that just sort of like is like a virus that just spreads out everywhere. So all of a sudden you
I want to know what you thought of COVID during this whole time. Just speaking of like, this is what you just mentioned virus, but just this whole, like, they're trying to make you believe this thing.
Right. Well, I mean, for the better, let's put it this way. Right now, as we speak in retrospect, it's unfortunately taken the lives of many people statistically on paper. But let's be honest, that has a lot to do with how that person has approached their life and how well they were before the virus turned up.
Right.
And then what it turned into, and then the need to control people. And if you want to talk about science, a lot of the things that we were subjected to, they don't hold water to this day. 3 years later, there's a lot of things that are questionable as to how people approached this whole pandemic or versions of it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it was all just kind of bogus.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And, that has to do with metabolic disorder. The reason most people were sick or got sick or were affected, because you get affected by the flu, is that
people were going to get sick regardless.
So the metabolic disorder is what's the biggest problem with the world today? Insulin resistance. Right? So that insulin resistance is how you affect all the other issues that you have in your body. Heart disease, blood pressure, kidney failure, liver disease. These all start from your body's ability or inability to utilize insulin, because that's a very powerful hormone.
Yeah, and like I'll even add, like, so my grandma passed away from COVID, and I mean, she's old. Like, it was going to be something, and so it's like, I don't know. The whole thing, obviously, whatever. But it's, whatever. Yeah. So as far as like food goes, you mentioned insulin, and food's a big thing with insulin, right? Yeah, we've taught you. You had asked me about this before. You're like, I see you've been fasting and things now too. Like, I'm actually fasting right now, and I love it, dude. Yeah. I started fasting for 24 hours once a week now, and it's great. And I'll fast once a quarter for at least 3 days. Right. Just water on that. Right now I'll do like coffee, but that's it for the 24 hours, because I'm not like...
That suppresses your appetite.
Yeah, but I would say like these once a week fast are not necessarily spiritual. They're more so just health related.
Right.
Versus the 3 day ones, I'll just do like spiritually related. What are your thoughts on fasting?
It's a miracle drug. Unfortunately, people don't want to hear about it. I mean, the truth is, you go through a cycle of fasting, within 12 hours, your body is now starting to clean up the mess that you created with bad decisions that you made through life choices. So within the 12 to 14 hour window, you start going into what they call autophagy, which some people speculate maybe in the 20 to 24 hour mark. I beg to differ, because out of my personal experience and witnessing it, and also seeing the physiological response that I get from doing it, it completely clears everything up, no matter what it is. And so what you're noticing also is where the energy is. So let's look at energy anatomy 101. Okay. So you have energy centers, right? This has been measured by Eastern philosophy, Eastern practice, Hindu, Chinese medicine, all that kind of good stuff. We talk about the meridians running through your body and the energy centers that you have, right? So from a Taoist perspective, you have dantians, which is your lower dantian, middle dantian, upper dantian, gut, heart, and head. When you start using the resources of your mental emotional state to distract you from what is cultivating energy and elevating your life force, right? You become drained. Have you ever come across someone where you're in a room and before you know it, by the end of it, when they leave, you're like, oh my goodness, I wish this person would just disappear. They're draining. Right?
Yeah.
They're absolutely draining. I'm like, how do I feel exhausted?
Bad
at this
energy.
point? Bad energy. Your words, remember, for someone who doesn't believe in energy. There you go, right? So understanding that is drawing from your life force. So when you put your attention and intention to an emotional process, right, that starts again with a thought, an emotion, and a feeling, always encapsulated in those three components, you will be drawing from your life force. So when you are fasting and you feel more energized by the end of it, holy moly, I feel strong.
Yeah.
I'm like, you'll find that, in most cases, you won't even need coffee, just water. I mean,
yeah, like the longest one I did was 5 days with no coffee. It's just a water fast.
And you could walk through a wall by the end of it.
Yeah, I was fine. Like, I did not need to eat. I just had set the deadline for myself, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to eat. And I actually had a buddy who just finished a 40-day fast.
Right.
And
he was like 40 pounds lighter.
He said he lost like 60 pounds. He was a pretty big guy to begin with.
Right. You're understanding that dynamic too. For someone like yourself, your body fat is a lot lower. It could be anywhere between 10 and 18% from what I can tell.
Yep.
So you're looking at, intramuscular, subcutaneous, and the versus between the two. So when you start adding temperature to your prescription, you can start elevating the brown fat, which will give you...
What do you mean elevating temperature?
So if you start doing things that are like
sauna,
cold or sauna.
Okay.
Basically, let's just put these in a nutshell, temperature-wise. Sauna elevates your vascularity, right?
Okay.
So the vasculature within your hands and feet and face is where your body takes in and releases temperature. That's how it works. So I would beg to differ when people get into these cold plunging scenarios where these hardcore CrossFitters run in there, and as long as you immerse your hands, your feet, and your face into whatever temperature you're into, you can make significant physiological changes in your hormonal cascade very, very quickly. So when you add cold, you are now adding an element that from a fasting perspective, you are wow, my goodness, I lost the track of thought.
It's all good.
We're talking
when we add cold into the temperature, the sauna does this, but what would a cold plunge do?
So the sauna will elevate or increase the blood flow.
Yeah.
The cold will restrict the blood flow, but the after effect of that is you create other hormones, a response to it, epinephrine, other things that are anti-inflammatory, and the side effect of cold, once you're out of it, is your veins get actually bigger. So there's more blood flow. And so when you're talking about sauna also elevates your heat shock protein, which basically trains your endothelial function, which is the inner lining of your cardiovascular system. It trains it to not acquire plaque. So you will basically not have a cardiovascular event by high levels of sauna. Systematically through a course of a week, you do 20-minute stints, try and get up to over 200, because that's where you start to elevate the growth hormone production. We're going up to 4,000% more than what you would normally produce, but you have to do it in concert with other things. But generally speaking, that production will eliminate plaque within the arteries, and then also train your body not to produce plaque within the endothelial function, which is basically creating that supple environment that you need so that you don't end up with arteriosclerosis when you're like 95. You will have healthy, supple arteries for your whole life if you understand how to take care of that, reducing or eliminating inflammation.
So, to recap, are you intermittent fasting every day?
Pretty much, because
Okay.
that's how you take charge of your life.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah, fasting is very powerful when you realize that energy center, your stomach, sex and eating food are two of the biggest saps of energy source. And so when you are doing those two things, you are drawing from your life force. Your aura is not expansive. It's restricted. It's contracted. And so you get distracted with the emotions, you get distracted with the eating, you get distracted with other extra you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So those sources are very, you can do a lot of things powerfully when you, what you eat, how you eat, and then also, ancient practices of Tantra and Kama Sutra and whatnot. We have our own practices that you can interconnect the energies and really generate a lot of what we call Jing, which is your life force. So you come into this world with a certain energy level, and that's your constitution.
Yeah.
But you can add to that through other practices of...
So you're saying for most people, food and sex would drain your life force, but if you do it right, they can increase your life force.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why you get so energized after fasting. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
Man, I could walk through a wall because
Yeah.
you're giving your body the ability to heal. And so
Yeah.
the autophagy component, where it's sucking up all the obscurely weird off-center mitochondria that you've created, which could turn into a disease, i.e. cancer.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine a Roomba on
Yeah.
your floor of your house, and your Roomba is going through your body and sucking up all the odd, obscure mitochondria that is defective, that is of no use to you, that would lay dormant and sort of turn up into some sort of like physical ailment later in your life. You're recycling that every day.
So let's go over food real quick. So we're talking about fasting and other things, and
Right.
I've had a lot of food guys on here who are very like Liver King. I had Gary Brecka on.
Did you have Liver King on?
Yeah, I had Liver King on.
All right, yeah.
Yep, and
I missed that one. I should have said, I'll go back and
you got to
that
check
one
it out.
Yeah.
So both Gary and Liver King were pro carnivore.
Sure.
And
They're
I
also
know,
40. I'm just, about,
and you're a vegan, right?
Right. I would say, when you say vegan, I would say I choose plants. I choose not to take the life of another living being. Whenever I go out to dinner, I'm like, I'll have anything that doesn't have a mother. Right?
Okay.
Right? So, and generally speaking, you start to understand that when you eat that type of food, you're creating a certain microbiome that your body is, and because we're all bacteria, right?
Right.
So the health of your immune system is determined by your gut.
Okay.
Right? So 90% of your immune system, it could be beg to differ. I personally would accept 90% of your immune system is measured by your gut health. So the microbiome, the gut flora is absolutely determined, the health of it, by what you put into your body. So a great way to wipe out your immune system immediately and destroy your gut flora, have a drink. Go and have an alcoholic beverage.
Right.
It'll wipe it off the floor.
Right.
So, but when you're talking about, we are herbivores. People can go, oh, prehistoric days. No, we go back to. Blah, blah. I use the test of time, and the longest living, community in the history of man that we can measure that is still punching out anywhere between 110 to 120-year-old living beings is a small town outside of Japan, and they are basically eating mostly plants, and they have basically fish, once a week or once a month. Because if we're talking about primitive or primal, there's no way you're going to catch yourself a bear or a rabbit with your bare hands. It's going to be a tough. So you could spend days fasting until your next meal comes along. And so the receptors in your tongue determine that they are set up to consume carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
That's the be all or end all. It's not, your teeth also determine what you're really feeding. What are you feeding on? The gum setup, the teeth setup within a human being is not designed to eat meat. But, we'll go on, but you can go into ketosis and, hey, listen, ketosis works for 3 months and then all of a sudden you have a downhill spiral. And well, why doesn't it work? All those CrossFitters, they're amazing. They're paleo, they're keto, they're this. Well, they're also eating, do you know what they're eating? The reason that's their saving grace?
What?
A pile of dark leafy greens, which has a high level of nitric oxide. And that nitric oxide is produced when you chew in any sort of leafy green. And that nitric oxide, what is that good for? It keeps your endothelial walls supple. So after the age of about 20, 23, your body stops producing nitric oxide. So you have to get external sources of it. And that's what you do by getting in greens. All dark leafy greens, highly cruciferous vegetables that will elevate the amount of nitric oxide that you get in your body, which keeps your arterial walls supple, the endothelial function of it, the lining. So yeah, I'm not a fan of
But is meat like just for you more of a moral thing than a health thing?
Well, you tell me. You are what you eat, right? And so you are digesting. I don't care where you find your meat. It's being altered some way, shape, or form by whoever's growing that animal,
right?
With what they're putting into it. So more likely than not, you're getting some type of chemical. Most people are like, I eat organic chicken, I eat organic beef, I eat organic. I would rather eat a conventional vegetable before I'd eat an organic.
But I mean, vegetables have chemicals and all these things too.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would rather eat a conventional vegetable with all the chemicals, because there's more chemicals in the meat itself, because guess where they get the vitamin B12?
Yeah.
Guess where they get the creatine? Yeah, all the things that they say that are essential, the 8 essential amino acids that are necessary to create protein that you use to regenerate and heal muscle tissue, come from plants. Yeah, they're from plants. They're not from the animal. The animal digests the food that you're eating to get what he took from the earth.
A plant, right.
Which is a plant. So, it's kind of like a cycle. And quite frankly, a lot of this stuff it's a cycle. I mean, you've been on the earth quite a few years, so have I. Atkins, how did that work out for him? Not too well, I mean, back in the 80s, we used to do MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides, and using coconut oil as a fueling tool for an energy source. So if you are in ketosis or a keto diet, you would use these medium chain triglycerides to generate the energy source that's necessary so you stay in.
Yeah, I've taken MCT oil before.
Right. And, everything's been done before.
Right.
And so the test of time will be determined, the paleo, the paleo, the CrossFit. Now, CrossFit, that's a whole nother ballgame. I probably shouldn't talk about that, but let's just talk about that. Today, right now, back in the 80s, you would look around a gym and you go, there's one or two guys that are big bodybuilders that are probably taking steroids.
Right.
Now, to this day and age, everyone is taking steroids. You go into a gym, and John Smith and Roger Bennett, who don't have any aspirations to become an athlete, are taking steroids. And CrossFitters, most of the CrossFitters, the top echelon, they're all taking steroids. Because you cannot hammer your body to that extent. Anything over 20 minutes of any type of intensive exercise elevates what do you call a homeostasis response, and your body's level of cortisol goes through the roof. So how do you, to combat that, you need an external element, which is how these people are able to maintain their muscle tissue, and their endurance, their anaerobic endurance goes through the roof because they're being given what they need.
Right.
Again, and I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Do whatever you want to do with your body, but don't sit here like you're talking about social media as being a great tool to sell people and go and tell them that, like Liver King,
Yeah.
I'm all natural, I just eat meat. And in actuality, his blood work was trashed.
Yeah.
And, him eating meat is only going to be a death knell. I would like to see him get to 55. He's maybe 45 right now, or early 40s. Let's talk about how he looks internally in the next 10 years and whether that even happens, because that's the biggest problem. And so TRT is another crutch. That was really popular back in the 90s. Everyone you could think of was reaching out for a growth hormone, testosterone, all these types of supplemental hormones. Well, take a look at Schwarzenegger and Stallone. They don't look so hot. And they're in their 70s, and they've got, Stallone would probably look a little better than that. But, they've all confessed to taking steroids to some degree. And for a fact they're on, hormone replacement therapy, which is a whole nother ballgame. So growth hormone, testosterone, you're playing with the hormonal cascade of the body. When you apply food, time, and also temperature, you can get everything you want out of your body.
You don't need all that stuff.
No. And you can do all the magic also internally when it comes to understanding how the electromagnetic field works. Because when you start to elevate your energy and know how to harness it, you can have a prescribed response from your hormonal cascade at will. And that's a practice. That's a practice that takes place. And then we go into, third eye, pineal gland, the pineal crystals, understanding how to raise that vibration and energy from up the spine into the brain. And that rush of energy changes it's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah. No, I love it. Going into this podcast, I was like, all right, what are we going to talk about here? Are we talking about like spirituality or anything? And then, to hear all of these scientific reasons for why things happen and why they exist and why people are the way they are, it gives me anyways, a much better understanding and also more, I guess, sympathy for people of like, man, why does that person like act like that? It's like, honestly, they kind of like were born into it. And,
right.
Even when I think about just like what the Bible talks about with lineage, there's so many things about lineage in the Bible. And, they talk about like sins of your father and all these things. And you're like, yeah, when you talk about having 14 generations of DNA on you, it's like, yeah, whatever my ancestors did, that for sure has been passed on to me and has made me part of the way I am, good or bad.
And on the other side of the coin, just with the epigenetic model, you can switch that gene expression with your mind alone. So instead of just going by, I'm genetically
I am what
born
I am.
into it. I'm genetically born. No, you have the power to change that.
Yeah.
You as an individual.
Yeah.
So that gene expression can be altered with your thoughts alone.
And this is what you're teaching in your app.
Yeah.
Where can people find that?
Well, it's at theway126.com, and we will be releasing the app in the next couple of weeks, probably mid-March.
Okay. Yeah, this will probably be out by the time that's released, so it'll be good timing.
Right. And so this is really my offering as someone who's mastered this area of expertise, to give to the world something that they can take back that power. Because, as you've mentioned and we touched on with this whole COVID thing, people have been in a state of dismay and uncertainty and definitely confusion. And that was sort of like, in my opinion, sort of like an architecture sort of like play. So with that, in my space, you get oppression, depression, and then you can go, we can speak on possession, whether it is in a mental, emotional thing. But yeah, you can talk on it as something that is of a higher level or something more ominous or dark. But in actuality, it's just someone realizing that they need to step out of the way of their personality and get back to the true source of who they really are.
I love that. Well, it's been great having you on the podcast. I appreciate you coming in. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure the viewers learned a lot. So
yeah, it's been great here, coming in here and having a chat and, speaking on things that are really valuable to both of us.
Yeah.
And just getting more of an insight.